All right, guys. So we have done pretty well so far. We have an understanding of how variables work, the different types of data that we're going to be playing with. We played around with some graphics, print statements we already know, and the mathematics. So now, up until this point, our code has basically done everything that we've programmed it to do step by step by step. Now what we want to do is we want to start taking some of the responsibility and put these items onto the user. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by this first example. So we probably remember this from the last chapter. All right, so we have first name equals Brian, and we write hello plus first name. If we were to run this, I'm just going to call this, let's save it on desktop, my Python files, exercise 5.1. This is old. This is a 4.1 example where we would save data under a variable name, and then we would print a statement that says hello plus whatever that variable has attached to it. Now here's the problem though. Let's say it's not Brian. Let's say we're dealing with Bob. Do we want to go in and change this every single time that we want our code to update? The answer is no. We're programmers. We are allowed to be lazy. And in fact, that's kind of our job. We don't want to do the job, so we're going to write the instructions for a computer to take care of the job for us. So instead of putting a specific value here, what we're going to do is we're going to use something called an input statement. All right, so input parentheses, what is your name? All right, now when I run this, the first thing that's going to show up is this prompt. This is going to ask us, what is your name? And then whatever they type in will be input data that gets attached to the first name variable. So let's try this. All right, let's say, what is your name? Let's say Samuel, and I press enter, and it says, hello, Samuel. I go back, I want to run it again. All right, what is your name? Tiffany. Hello, Tiffany. It's really cool that we can get this code to constantly react based on what the person types in. And for the first time, now our code is interactive. And that's a big step in terms of programming. We learned the basics, how to make little things happen here and there, but now we're saying, you know what? Some of this responsibility goes on to you, the user. I don't want this responsibility anymore. I don't want to have to deal with it. I want you to type in your data so I don't have to do a lot of the work. And this program can start responding to what the user needs it to do. All right. So there is also, we can put in an additional input. We could put in 1 million inputs if we wanted, but we're going to put in 2 for now. So I have first name, last name equals input. What is your last name? And I might as well go into this and fix it. What is your first name? What is your last name? So we can say hello first name plus a space plus last name plus a period, just because I want to be, you know what? Let's make it fancy. Let's make it with an exclamation point. Now when we run this, you're going to notice we're not going to get both inputs at the same time. And this is a big thing that I want to clarify. What is your first name? Brian. Now, when I pressed enter, it brought me to the next line. What is your last name? Fadouk. Hello, Brian Fadouk. Awesome. So this is pretty neat in that we can now have our code ask questions and then respond using our answers later on in the code. All right. Whenever you're doing something like creating an account with Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, every time you enter in details into like a text box or something like that, you're literally doing the input statement. Now it's a lot more polished, it looks a lot more fancy, all those different things, but for the most part, you're doing the right thing. You're doing the right input kind of thing. So again, we're learning the building blocks as to what makes all code run. Okay? So that's the first one. I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff because the next things that we need to look at, what we want to do is look at how to bring in those other types of data, not datas. So we already have strings. That's what we have every time we type in something like a name or a piece of text or something like that. But we also need to bring in integers, and we also need to bring in floats. And those are the other two types of data that we need to specify within our code. So let's tackle integers first, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's say x equals, and I want to do an input, give me a number, and I will double it. Okay? Then what we have is, let's say, print your doubled number is plus str of 2 times x, right? Because if we look back at our old stuff, if we want strings to show up as data, we put a str around it. So obviously I'm setting this up to fail, but what we want to do is look at this and see how it behaves, and then go back and then fix what we have to address, all right? So let's try running this guy. Run module. Give me a number and I will double it. Okay, let's say 42. When I press enter, your doubled number is 4242. Well, technically it's not wrong. My number is doubled, but not in the mathematical sense. It is doubled in the string sense. So what we need to do is we need to look at this and say, it looks like we keep getting strings, and then it's going to double that value. Because if I take this back a step, let's degrade this a little bit. Let's lower this just so we can see what it looks like, just like this. Just in case maybe there's some weird shenanigans going on, all right? Let's say I give it 5. I still get 5, 5. Okay, so that's not the issue. So let's bring that back, all right? Now, what we want to do up here, this is where we want to pay attention to our code, all right? What I need to do is I need to indicate to Python this will be an integer. So here's something to think about. You'll probably get the answer before I reveal it. If turning an item into a string requires us to put an str in parentheses around it, how could we turn the input into an integer? And I'll give you a second. Okay, the trick is to just int, parentheses, surrounding, all of it. So now what we're saying is, hey Python, here's still an input, but when you found the input, I want you to turn it into an integer. All right, so let's try this now. Let's try running this. Okay, give me a number, I'll double it. Let's say 12, and our doubled number is 24. Perfect, we got it. All right, so what this allows us to do is try to convert it into an integer. Here's your little warning. If I run this and I type in something like the word cat, it's going to say, obviously, I can't turn cat into an integer. So just be careful on this. There are ways to take the user's input and eventually turn it into an integer later, or even test to see if it can be considered an integer. We're not going to go into that because we're just going to assume that our users can type in proper data for now. Maybe in an advanced course we can look at like kind of fixing or adjusting the user's input, or even just not allowing them to type in things into it. All right, but for right now, this is a nice working program. I put in that previous number, 42, and our doubled number is 84. Cool. So we get an actual doubling system. The big thing that we need is that we need to recognize that it needs to be an int. All right. So let me try running this one more time. Let's try to get like really sneaky or cool with it. 4.5, because I know that'll evaluate to 9. When I try to run it, it says invalid literal for int with base 10, 4.5. So because of that 0.5, remember, we have floats are with decimals. So we don't put in FLO, if you were assuming that. What we need to do is put in float. And now when I try running this, give me a number and I will double it, 4.5, and your double number is 9.0. Because it is a float, it's always going to leave that 9.0 to always indicate to us that says like, hey, you got decimals, so I'm going to give you decimals. If we wanted to fix that, we could do an int inside of here. So now we're making things really complicated, right? I want to string the integer of 2 times x. And now if I run it, all right, 4.5, we get just a solid 9. But here's the problem. 1.25 gives us 2 because we converted it to an integer. So sometimes we don't want to do that, all right? Sometimes we just want to leave it as it is, leave it as a float, and that should be perfectly fine for showing our information the way we want it to display. Again, introductory course, we would figure those things out if we wanted to build a working application or game that we were trying to publish to, for people to play or use or things like that. But again, we're just building the building blocks. All right? So, the input statement is a very powerful tool. All right? It allows the user to type in something to communicate with us. All right? So, what we want to do to kind of build a piece of code is we want to build something really, really easy for today, all right? And we'll go into adding more advanced features later on. So I'm just going to show you it on here, all right? What I want you to try doing, just for your example, I want you to kind of replicate this code. It asks, what is your name? You put in your name, obviously. What is your favorite color? You type in your favorite color. What is your favorite food? Type in the favorite food. What is your favorite sport? Type in the favorite sport. And these are all 4 input statements, all right? You want each of these 4 items to be an input that the person can type in. So it's not always going to be Brian, blue, pizza, football. It could be Sam, orange, tacos, soccer. It could be whatever name or item that the person decides to type in, and it builds a sentence after it. This may sound very, very familiar to your 4.1 task. If you can find that and just adjust these 4 to input statements, you're done. Call it a day. You kind of understand how the input statements work. All right? So, with that in mind, I'm going to leave you to it. This is a pretty short lesson. Input statements are pretty neat. Things that I want you to make sure that you really understand and feel comfortable with is obviously, can you make an input statement happen? And were you able to successfully use floats and integers to convert or change the values so that whatever's typed in as an input gets put out into the number? If you didn't do those examples with me, please, please, please do them, because I want to make sure that you guys are successful when you piece all of this together. You're going to need inputs for the rest of this course. One of the things that as this course ramps up in content, I'm going to reference things that I expect you to have memorized. Basic stuff. You better remember print statements. How the mathematics works, sure, you can always go back if you need. Graphics, that's something you're going to want to revisit again and again. I don't expect anyone to be a master of turtle graphics. But you need to know what variables are. You need to be setting variables comfortably. And now you have inputs on the table. You have to know how to do inputs. Everything from this course moving forward is going to use all of these things, assuming that you've played around with it enough that you understand how it works. Okay? So this is kind of where the training wheels come off. I'm going to be talking about things, referencing things that you should know. You may have to go back to previous videos to relearn items if you forget. So just keep that in mind. All right? So hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. Nice, short, and sweet. And hopefully you're feeling pretty comfortable with it. In the next example, we're going to be applying inputs to graphics. And then on top of that, we're going to go one step further in assignment 5.3. You're going to actually be making your first quote-unquote game. It's going to be a Mad Libs game, and it's not going to require the integers or the floats, but it's a lot of fun, and it's a good way to solidify how comfortable you feel with all this stuff so far. All right, so I will leave it at that, and thanks for watching.